In November 2021, a special concert was held at the Shanghai Concert Hall. The Chinese-Canadian writer, Bela, sang her own adaptation of the Jewish ballad Donna Donna and named it Song of Survivors, which refers to the survivors of the Jewish refugees in the history of Shanghai. By exploring the experiences of these survivors in Shanghai, Bela, with an eye for love and beauty, wrote a memoir of survivors for 5 years, which was named as Song of Survivors. In those turbulent times, it was Shanghai that lifted up the life and hope of the Jews. Zhoushan Road is an unassuming little road in Hongkou District in Shanghai. However, there were many Jews living here and many stories leaving here. In 1939, a 13-year-old German boy fled Nazi persecution with his family and found shelter in Shanghai. They were then sent to the Jewish refugee designated area. The whole family lived in a small compartment of the apartment, which was located at 59 Zhoushan Road, until they left in 1947. He was Werner Michael Blumenthal, former U.S. Secretary of Treasury. The latest novel of Bela, 59 Zhoushan Road, was just based on the real-life experiences of Blumenthal in Shanghai during World War II.
我外公当时有带我到提篮桥那一带去玩过，经过那个火山路的时候，他说这里以前是小维也纳，当时这里就有很多来自欧洲人，他说他们是犹太人。
Bela, originally named Lei Shen, was born in Shanghai. As a teenage girl, Bela was introduced by Wei Xiaochong to visit Beijing and Beiyang for several times. Beiyang even introduced her own sister, Young Mo, author of Song of Youth, to Bela. Close communication with the two writers that she had long admired lit up Bela's dream for literature.
我的处女作叫《东京夜色》，是由陕西人民出版社出版的，在91、92年，很早，也就20几岁的时候，我一篇篇散文写东京生活，就那个时候还是贾平凹，他还帮我写的序，所以给我的鼓励也是很大的。
Later, Bela gradually turned to write romantic novels, which were mainly about transnational romance. She published Sentimental Casablanca, Celestial Wedding, and more than 10 other novels. In 1996, at a gathering of friends after moving to Canada, Bela got to know Arthur, a survivor of Zhangya wheel tragedy in 1948, who was also a descendant of Jewish refugees from Shanghai in World War II.
他就说我妈妈是宁波人，生我啊，然后就把他的这个故事跟我说了。他爸爸跟着爷爷奶奶是从那边欧洲逃难到上海，在虹口去开了一个西药店，然后他就在上海出生。
From then on, Bela got involved with the Jewish refugee community in Shanghai.
那我后来就发现我特别适合写这段历史。首先我是上海人，上海出生的第3代上海人。 而且呢，我对犹太人很熟悉，然后我周围有很多很多的犹太人的朋友，最重要的就是我的生命中奔腾的那种激情、爱和丰富的感情，我觉得非常适合去表现男女主人公这种爱情的，所以我就想，我依然是写跨国爱情，对吧？但是我的整个背景我就放在犹太人在上海。
Bela had traveled all over the world over the past 2 decades to collect the Shanghai memories of the Jews who once lived or were born in Shanghai, which turned her into a Chinese-Canadian writer concerned with the suffering of mankind.
越早就是碰到犹太人，在上海的犹太人就越多。就我印象特别深，就是他们知道我是来自上海，然后他们总是很报以就是热情。他们都说，他们都记得，就是上海曾经救了他们3万犹太人的生命。他们对上海这座城市，称赞他，又说，他们在那边的生活非常的温馨，也比较难忘。他们大部分人就是对，上海市民这种感情就比较深，就说上海人特别热情。
Every place she went, Bela would visit the local libraries and archives. She accumulated a large number of research notes there, which laid a solid foundation for her subsequent work.
05年的时候呢，我就开始，我因为在图书馆嘛，我接触到一个音乐家，是真实的故事啊。他就是我书中在《幸存者之歌》也提到的香肠男高音，他其实最早就是维也纳的一个很有名的一个歌剧的一个演员嘛。
The earliest Jews in Shanghai date back to the opening of Shanghai. The Jews also left their own marks in old Shanghai. The 20th century witnessed a wave of anti-Semitism around the world. A succession of persecuted Jewish refugees arrived in Shanghai. It was well known that about 30,000 Jewish refugees persecuted by Nazis came to Shanghai in the 1930s. Shanghai was then known as the Noah's Ark of the Jews.
It's amazing. It's the only place all over the universe that gave visas to犹太人, to Jewish people who ran away from Europe during this period of time. They found here shelter.
These Jewish refugees were very poor when they came to Shanghai. Thanks to the help of the Jewish community in Shanghai and their own efforts, they were finally able to establish themselves in Shanghai. The Tianqiao area in Hongkou district now was the largest settlement of Jewish refugees at that time.
So, we're now sitting in the middle of what was the ghetto, the place where the Jewish refugees actually lived. And it's very emotional for me, not just as a犹太人, as a Jewish person and an Israeli, but also as a second generation of Holocaust survivor. It's very touching, and I learned a lot about all the details about their lives, how they arrived there, who helped them. So now when you come to the Bela story, for me it's like a revival, seeing that in all this mess, in all this hardship, there was life. Fell in love, got married. This is really, really an exciting and a very good way to pass this to the next generation.
At the beginning, Shanghai citizens around were curious about these foreigners. But as they got to know each other better, they became friends who helped each other.
我记得好多犹太人都跟我提到过，就是中国人的春节嘛，对吧？然后中国人非常客气，他们有的时候会 包饺子，上海本地人会做汤圆，然后春节会做八宝饭，这些他们都会去给他们的犹太人的邻居。
I don't remember any story that somebody complained about treatment that they got from their neighbors. Vice versa, all of them emphasize the openness and friendship from the Jewish community, and this helps to flourish, this Jewish community to flourish and to form the vibrant life in Shanghai and contribute to the very special atmosphere that was here in Shanghai during the two World Wars and the contribution of the Jewish community to the cultural and economic life of Shanghai.
In early 2007, Bela's first novel about Jews in Shanghai, named as The Cursed Piano, was published. The main character, Adam, was a Jewish pianist in Poland. He went into exile with his family in Leningrad, USSR. He then moved to Shanghai via Harbin. They just lived around Zhoushan Road and Zhoushan Road in Hongkou District.
"因为我自己本身从小就是蛮喜欢音乐的，我对音乐也有点感觉，所以我就想，我是蛮适合写就是我熟悉的生活。那么我想要我的男主人公应该就是个音乐家。
Adam and other Jews went through ups and downs in the refugee area.
最困难的时候就是当时日本人就加紧控制了这批犹太人、犹太难民，所以呢，当时犹太人他们有的人就是出不去。他们说走在隔离区当中的那些犹太难民，我说女士哈，他们可以穿着那个皮草大衣出来，很旧的，带了一个皮草大衣，然后里面就身边1分钱都没有，所以他当时就是要把这些衣服去当掉一点点钱，来换来一些面包，在里面就是几乎要被饿死，还有就是生病了就没有买不起药的，那个年代真的是很残酷。那个时候呢，就中国邻居就会给他们年糕、面条啊，给他们做的一些饼啊什么的。
In the context of the war, the transracial romance between Adam and Chinese girl Li Mei was really touching.
因为和平年代，我们除了男女的情感以外，它有很多的东西你可以去享受，你可以享受旅行啊，可以去享受丰厚的物质生活呀，对吧？很多很多。但战争年代动乱当中，那么爱情就是真正的是最重要了。他真正的整个爱就是给亚当的，但是又得不到，然后就终身守望。因为战争这个之下，谁都不知道明天会怎么样，对吧？所以我们就把握好今天，因为你可能失去的之后，可能你今天这次相遇以后，你再也见不到了，这可能就是你们最后的一次，就有一种这种情绪在里面的。
And Adam's wife in the book failed to live until the end of the war. This work topped the Shanghai Book Fair bestseller list for 2 consecutive years, in 2009 and 2010. Bela signed and sold 2,000 sets in 1 hour for her 6-volume novel, On the Road to Love.
有些人年纪都很大了，然后他们就说：“我以前是看你那个时候什么《旅日女人手记》啊，《东京夜市》那些早期的看你书的。”他说：“我们是见证了你的这么一个成长嘛，就觉得你先写海外的风景散文开始，接下来呢又回到了一个战争的这么一个重大的这么一个题材，他就觉得你在进步嘛，买起书买好多，所以我就特别感动。”
When The Cursed Piano was published, the planner, Anne Beauchamp, sent the Chinese manuscript to the famous American sinologist and Chinese translator Howard Goldblatt. Goldblatt soon agreed to translate the book into English and offered to translate the follow-up books of the Bela Jews in Shanghai series.
他说，因为他是犹太人，他的 说里面这些人类共通的情感，然后浪漫的这种爱情故事，尤其是在战争这么一个背景下，然后上海市民的这种友爱，上海这座城市的宽容，他说很打动他。所以这个是等于是犹太民族当中感恩的篇章。
After Goldblatt and his wife completed the translation of The Cursed Piano, they came all the way from America to Shanghai to visit the Jewish Refugees Museum and look back on those memorable years.
他觉得我完全能够被西方社会认可，所以他就说这个书这部作品很可能就是成为他翻译中国作品中可能最能够被西方人接受的，能够打动的。
This novel also caught the attention of Zhao Qijang, former director of the State Council Information Office. He once presided over the compilation of the feature album Jews in China.
他写的呢，挖掘到人的内心，挖掘到两个民族的共同点。他很有潜力，他需要时间，他需要在广泛的认识更多的犹太人和更多的知道这段历史的中国人。
就是你一出了第一本书，然后就有这么多的人来关注你，而且这些人也都是世界上顶尖的那些人，尤其是犹太社群当中的顶尖的人物，也非常鼓舞。
Introduced by Zhao Qijang, Bela made a group of new Jewish friends. Among them was Hollywood gold medal producer Mike Medavoy. He once worked as producer or executive producer for the movies, including One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, The Silence of the Lambs, Shutter Island, etc. He was an 8-time Oscar winner for Best Pictures, and also one of the few producers on the Hollywood Walk of Fame.
这么一个制片人也是有距离感的，因为就觉得他好了不起啊，一个世界顶尖的一个电影人嘛。但是他一说到爸妈上海，然后说到的上海菜什么，这距离马上就拉近了啊。然后就是我们聊了很多很多。
It turns out that Medavoy was born in Shanghai during World War II. His parents were Jewish refugees too. He has lived in Shanghai for more than 20 years.
还有一批就是来自俄罗斯的犹太人，他们有一就是犹太人，他们是相对于就是那一批欧洲来的更多的自由，他们至少可以寻梦，他就是，但是在这个十里洋场，他们也是非常不容易，一开始也是非常贫穷的过来，那么所以他在上海就最终也能够被美商电话公司录取做高管，也拿到了很好的收入，应该当时有几百美金吧，那个。 在当时是不得了的。
The American telephone company that David works for has played an important role in the development of Shanghai's telecommunications business and is also a microcosm of Shanghai's urban modernization.
早在1870年，就耽美大北电报公司就 辐射了从上海到香港，以及上海到长崎的那个海缆。那么，大北电报公司当时的呢公司地址，实际上就在我们现在的上海电信博物馆。
Later, Medavoy agreed to serve as the producer of the adopted film of the same name, The Cursed Piano, and invited British playwright Ronald Harwood to adapt the screenplay for the novel. Harwood once won the Oscar for Best Adapted Screenplay for The Pianist. The Cursed Piano became the last work of Ronald Harwood.
我记得潘光也跟我说过，因为潘光是研究犹太难民的嘛，潘光老师说，哈伍德就写你剧本的时候嘛，他还会打电话来给问潘光。 关于就是上海那些什么样的情况，然后我跟他交流，他后来就觉得就是跟他的钢琴师，其实他说可以归为姊妹篇了。
In 2010, Bela met Medavoy's mother, Dora, in Los Angeles.
他说：“贝拉，侬好呀，侬就是贝拉。哎哟，阿拉妈可是一年到地到侬。伊讲，哎呀，太好了，太好了，多少年数？伊讲没看到上海朋友了。”
Later, Bela visited Dora many times and listened to Dora's stories in Shanghai.
当时也问他，我说你印象最深的是什么？你看我印象最深的是我囡恩生出来的辰光，有一个邻居，他们是从宁波过来的。他说送了我女儿啊，那件衣服啊是 handmade， 他就用英语说了，手工做的一件衣服。哎，我说你这个好像您说的跟我小时候我外婆给我的是一模一样的。然后后来我就拍了一个照片，我回来以后给他看是不是一样，他说一模一样，就是这个。我说对，当时宁波人就会给刚刚出生的女孩，然后就穿这样的衣服。
Therefore, Dora and Mike's father, David, has become the character prototype of the second novel, Song of Survivors, in the Jews in Shanghai series, written by Bela. David in the novel appears as a Jewish youth who had nothing. Later, introduced by a Chinese friend, he joined an American telephone company. With the wisdom and diligence of the Jews, he became the general manager of the company at last. During the War of Resistance against the Japanese aggression, David used his authority to provide cover for the communications radio station of the Chinese army. When Shanghai was just about to get liberation, he again worked with the underground communists to protect critical communications equipment. These equipments have also become important capital for the telecommunication enterprise of New China to start up.
抗日战争爆发前，也就是1737年前，上海已经成为远东最大的经济和通信中心。从通信的角度来说，它已经建成了一个具有相当规模的室内电话网，同时呢，已经建成了非常发达的那个国内以及国际的长途电信通讯网。
The main storyline centers on David and Dora, and the novel also introduces another group of characters. Ladies of fashion like Yao Huijun, who answer the phone in Chinese and English. They represent the most fashionable landscapes of the times in Shanghai.
我穿插这个姚慧君，因为是我见到生活中的几位姚慧君。当时就是在上海电信下面有一个叫瑞星养老院，有好几位哦，就是真的跟普通的就是老人是不一样的。首先很高雅，气质优雅，然后里面有钢琴，他就弹钢琴。世博会的时候，不是外宾来参观嘛，就用英语跟人家交流，所以给我的就是印象特别深。然后这个人物也就是让这本书火起来。
In order to create a good image of David, an employee of the American Shanghai Telephone Company, Bela delves into the history of Shanghai Telecom. Surprisingly, in the Shanghai Telecom archives, the staff files of the American Telephone Company are still well preserved, including a photo of Mike's father, David, when he was young, file forms, pay rise form, etc.
Let's welcome the crew of a Jewish piano.
In 2012, Mike Medavoy was awarded the Outstanding Achievement Award at the Shanghai International Film Festival. Bela walked on the red carpet with him.
他那个时候上海国际电影节嘛，授予他就是一个终身成就奖。他说我这么年轻，我才70多岁，授予我终身，我要奋斗，然后好，就给你一个杰出成就奖。
Before entering the scene, Bela gave Mike a surprise.
我说我给你看个照片，他爸爸20岁时候的那个履历的照片，我拍了一下给他看。他说我从来没有看到过，然后眼泪就啪啪流下来。然后他本来要说我们这个电影计划啊什么的，结果整个颁奖的时候，他说我脑子全忘了。
Shanghai it has roots for me, and it's always back to come back to your roots. My parents lived here for 24 years, and we're always remindful of the fact that This was the place that gave them the safety net that they needed. About 15 years ago, I brought my father here, actually, to the first Shanghai Film Festival. And when I got him to the airport, he cried. And I asked him why he was crying, and he told me that this was the place that saved our lives. So for that, I'm deeply appreciative. Last time as I was driving around Shanghai, I saw my parents' face, despite the fact that my father passed away 8 years ago. So as you can see, deeply emotional.
And what the Medavoys care about the most is their old residence where they lived in Shanghai before.
他说我有2个地标啊，一个是西摩会堂啊，第2个地标呢，他说离开那个就是有一个就很大的一个像别墅一样的啊，我说马勒别墅，对对对，很漂亮，就离开那个都蛮近的，是走路的距离，就是我们到处就围着这个圈，就静安区，所以走啊走啊，漫无目的的走到晚上吃饭，对吧？所以就是我找来找去都很失望。到最后我要帮他找，他说贝拉你别找了，他说上海都拆迁了，我们家肯定都拆掉了。
In 1995, Mike once took his parents, David and Dora, came back to Shanghai. David burst into tears as he looked out over the Shanghai Bund on the Huangpu River.
And I was surprised. And I said to him, Dad, why are you crying? He said, well, I really didn't want to come back to Shanghai because I had great memories of my time in Shanghai. I was young, energetic, and I was afraid that I would never meet up with my expectations. I'm emotional because I'm really happy that I came, and I want to thank you. I had some great memories here. This was a wonderful city.
The family traveled all over Shanghai, but still failed to find the apartment where they used to live. Later, in the spirit of giving it a try, Bela tried to find their apartment by using the home address listed in David Medavoy's file, and she made it.
就是也是去有意无意的去找那些英文的地址，因为他当时写的 Avenue 什么的 Road Avenue Road 我也不知道上海哪里是什么 Avenue Road 啊，对吧？就通过就上海就是当地的老上海人，就是上海不是有上海志嘛，就让他们专家去帮我查，到底什么路，后来查出来了，就是北京西路。他的门牌号跟迈克爸爸履历上写的一模一样，没有一点点区别。
This Avenue apartment, located at the intersection of Beijing West Road and Tongren Road, belongs among historic buildings. This is the house where David and Dora used to live in. Bela made her first visit to the old residence in 2018.
我把家里的就拍了很多东西，我都传给麦克。哎呀，他激动得不得了了。然后那天就是我说你们要不要对我们的就是 Mike Medavoy， 就之前故居的小主人说一些话呀？然后那个叫卢安东先生，卢老师，他是大学的老师，所以他就用英语跟麦克说了一段话。
Hi, Mike. How are you? This is Anthony Lu, and I'm very honored to have the opportunity speaking to you in this video recording. And during this past 70 years, my family has been living here, and we helped conserve everything. And hereby, I'd like to invite you to come to Shanghai and have a visit.
Before David and his family left Shanghai in 1948 and sold this apartment for a few gold bars to a young man in Shanghai. Later, the young man got married and settled down, and he passed away a few years ago.
哎，卢先生，侬好，侬好，侬好，你好，
里边请。
谢谢。
When Bela visited this house, she was surprised to find that many places remained as they were.
他们喝的酒用的酒杯都是非常高档啊。你看，你打开看看，你打开看看，对。你看这里边的他们用的酒杯，你看都是当时称为叫刻花玻璃，你看到吗？哦，这都刻花玻璃啊，这个花都是花纹当时用手工做上去的。
对，很精致。
这里原来是他们的卧室。
这么好的环境里。
对。
当您知道就这里是 Mike 全家的住居的时候，您第一个反应是什么？
我感觉到，哎呀，我们一是感到非常荣幸啊，第二感到非常的惊讶啊，我们从来不知道我们的前面的居住在这个房子里边的主人竟然是Mike 这一家。
这个钢琴呢是80年前，就是 Mike 的母亲 Dora Medavoy 女士她弹的钢琴。我来试试看，这80年没弹的，这钢琴的声音还怎么样？ 还不错。我来弹一首朵拉经常弹的犹太民谣《夜玫瑰》。
哦，我晓得吧？那个就伊拉只大菜单。
哦，这
搿只钢琴，跑进来客厅就是搿能介样子，没门个，客厅是搿能介样子。
010。
搿个有分开有，那搿看了可能比较清楚。
It's a pity that Dora failed to live through the day when the novel was published and couldn't go back to visit her old home. Bela laid flowers by the grave of David and Dora. Bela said what moved her the most about David and Dora was not only their touching stories in Shanghai when they were young, but also their strong feelings for Shanghai and their hometown. Therefore, I wanted to write this for them, the song of youth for the Jews in Shanghai.
贝拉他写这部小说，不仅是真实的再现了当时上海人的海纳百川了，就是对遭受战争迫害的犹太人给他们一种家的感觉，同时他自己也呼唤了一种大爱，这种爱就是超越了对于本民族同胞的爱，而是对全人类的这么一种共同的爱。
只有这个在异国他乡常年，这个人的这个心态、精神，它是不一样的。所以这个也是贝拉等于替这个流浪的犹太人找到了一个中国最好的代言者。作家呢，抓住这样的题材来写作，它实际上不仅仅是文学艺术的问题了，它对有强烈的这个人道主义、反种族主义这个国际正义这样一些正能量的文化蕴含。
我相信假以时日，这个由于这个作品本身谈了犹太人的故事，讲的是犹太人的故事，又这样充满这种人道主义精神的浪漫的色彩去描写这些生活，我相信会得到广大读者的这样的一种认可，特别是犹太这个社群的一种认可那些经历过这种战争创伤的他们的后代们会欣然的接受去阅读这样的作品。
船起航了，他们全家走到了甲板上。
At the concert of Song of Survivors, Take Me Back to Shanghai, recited by Bela, truly shows Dora's deep attachment to Shanghai.
这时 Mike 拉着朵拉的手说 ：“Mom， 我把小汽车藏在床底下，忘拿了。我要回去，我不要离开上海。 那是我们的家呀 ，Mom。
Together with artists from China, the United States, Russia, Israel, and Canada, Bela would like to extend their gratitude to Shanghai with music.
亲爱的多拉，当我为这部耗时5年的长篇小说《幸存者之歌》画上最后的句号时，正是落雨的黄昏。
Consuls General and cultural attaché from more than 10 countries, including Israel, the United States, and Russia, were present at the concert.
I would like to thank to the organizers of this evening. It's very emotional and very special evening for us. And on behalf of the Consulate of Israel in Shanghai, if I may, on behalf of the Jewish community and the Israeli community, I would like to thank you for organizing this very special event here in this beautiful hall in Shanghai.
在奥斯维辛，那一缕缕冒出的浓烟，一定在向天空、向大地、向人间呼喊：自由、和平，还有爱情。
真的是因为在过去的10多年里面哈，我跟他们全家的接触，跟他们的交流当中，就发现他们那种对上海就洋溢着，并不亚于我的对故乡的这种情感，所以我又被他们这种情感给感动了，所以我想一定要把他们全家，或者朵拉没有实现的这样的一个最终回上海的这么一个梦，通过各种各样我的一个个人的一个方式去把它展现出来。
临终之前，他在半清醒半模糊的状态下，他依然说：“带我回上海。”所以我想今天我就把他们全家带回上海了，然后我们永远留下他们在上海的这么一个情景，也让我们所有的中外的朋友们永远记住我们希望永远的和平，在充满爱的世界里生活。
Over the years, Shanghai has accepted over 23,000 Jewish refugees. And on this day, the International Holocaust Memorial Day, we do remember the important role Shanghai had and the special meaning for us Israelis. We will never forget the shelter provided us by China and by Shanghai.
On January 27, 2022, the sculpture of the same name for Song of Survivors was unveiled at the Shanghai Jewish Refugees Museum. The main sculpture is 2.6 meters high and weighs 5 tons, donated by the author Bela. The sculpture depicts the moment when the Medavoy's family bid farewell to Shanghai on the ship. The consuls general and their spouses of over 10 countries in Shanghai witnessed the unveiling of the sculpture.
整个犹太人在上海的2战时期这段历史，都可以归纳为幸存者之歌。在战争年代，活着就是希望，活着就是胜利，活着就是 everything。所以就是我要把所有人，就是都作为一个幸存者之歌，这样来传播出去。
希望我们拉小姐了解更多犹太的文化和犹太人的故事，对此我抱有期望。
In Bela's novel, Shanghai is a representation of youth and love, childhood and memory for the Jews. She's just like the Noah's Ark of the Jews. For Bela, she wrote about the Jews in Shanghai series and embarked on a journey to find her hometown of life. Huangpu River is the source of her life, and she looked back at her hometown with literature. Bela said, "The Huangpu River that flows day and night is my mother river."
对我来说就是上海，你看，就是日夜流淌的黄浦江畔，对我来说就是母亲，就是我的母亲河，它对我来说就是我整个的生命。
Bela's home in Shanghai is located on the banks of the Huangpu River. facing the 100-year-old Bund across the river. Through French windows, she saw the Huangpu River at dawn and the exotic building clusters in the Bund of Shanghai. As if turning back the clock, there's a lot of inspiration going on, one story after another, as if movie scenes popping out of her mind.
所以就是当时上海，我的故乡，就是能够伸出他热情的这么一个胸怀啊，去拥抱这么多就是飘零异乡、逃亡中的犹太人，所以我们这个故乡真的是非常的伟大。我对我的故乡这段历史真的就是成为我整个创作的源泉了。
So far, Bela has completed the manuscripts of 6 novels of Jews in Shanghai, in addition to the published novels, The Cursed Piano and Song of Survivors. She also completed 59 Zhoushan Road, which is based on the character Blumenthal, former U.S. Treasury Secretary, and The Golden Palace on the Sea, based on the shipwreck survivors of Jiangya wheel tragedy. In addition, Bela also plans to create a spiritual history of Jewish refugees. The parents of Lawrence Tribe, a professor of law at Harvard Law School, a well-known expert on Constitution, in the Hongkou Jewish ghetto during World War II.
Lawrence Tribe 在很多场合都说，因为上海就是庇护了这么多的犹太人，让他们后来的生活就有了一些可能。所以现在我们就已经约好，就是等到疫情结束呢，我就当面去采访他。
More than 80 years have passed. Fewer and fewer Jews used to live in Shanghai during World War II are now still alive. Shanghai-born Jews are also over 80 years old. There are fewer and fewer witnesses to the shared history of the Chinese nation and the Jewish nation, helping each other and sharing weal and woe. Bela had a sense of mission and urgency. She wanted to dedicate more Song of Survivors to her beloved hometown, Shanghai.
"人类的生命像一条奔腾不息的长河，从远古流淌至今。爱与信仰是那不息的火炬，熊熊燃烧，照亮人类前行的路。沉睡在黑夜茫茫，忽闪着一束光。咚啦咚啦咚啦咚啦，咚啦咚啦咚啦咚啦，咚啦咚。